In 1970, a man named David Robert Jones, who many of you will know as David Bowie, released a song called The Man Who Sold the World. In the song, he addressed a part of himself he thought to be gone or dead. Many believe that this part refers to his soul, which is ultimately responsible for his identity, personality, and therefore any and all creative output of his. As the song goes on, Bowie learns that this part of him is not dead and gone, but is very much alive and well, and is actually resurgent. It refers to itself as the man who sold the world, making an intrinsic part of who David Bowie was, a salesman and a marketer. Today I'll be diving into some of the lessons he can teach us as future marketers, and I just think that he can exemplify the lessons we've learned really well. First and foremost, he can teach us about the importance of change and innovation. He himself was a little bit of a chameleon. Every few years or albums, he would reinvent himself in a new persona with its own musical direction, fashion sense, because he realized early on that he couldn't keep doing the same thing if he was going to be successful. For example, in 1969, he released his debut album called David Bowie, and whilst the lyrical content was a little bit different and strange, musically it was the same brand of music that everyone else at the time was releasing. So naturally, he reinvented himself as Ziggy Stardust, an androgynous musician who'd been contacted by aliens and given special powers, and he released a concept album that launched his career, making him one of the most widely spoken about and recognizable musicians of his time. For a brand as well, the risk of stagnating and becoming perceived as boring, repetitive, or monotonous is really real and really easy to succumb to. Consumers don't tend to flock to those brands that say the same thing over and over again, but they want something new, fresh, and exciting every time. Just because everyone is doing something and just because you've done something in the past that has worked doesn't mean that it's going to be the best way to go in the long run or that it's the right thing to do. As Bowie said, it's a lot more fun progressing than going back, and in the long run for a brand, it's a lot more successful too. The next thing he can teach us is why we should try new things. He knew the line between known and unknown, acceptable and unacceptable at every stage in his career, and he treated it a little bit like a skipping rope. He would do things like, as a man in 1960s London, walking around in a dress and makeup or dressing up as an alien on stage, which is completely sort of unexpected. The lesson there is that trying new things is important because he took the shock value and he understood the value of shock value, and he used it to market the things that really mattered. So he took all the media attention he gained and turned it to his music, which is ultimately what he wanted to promote. So here, on his 50th birthday, he said, "I don't know where I'm going from here, but I promise it won't be boring." And he never was boring or repetitive. For a brand as well, saying the same thing gets super boring, and consumers get bored very, very easily, especially in today's attention economy. So trying new things is so, so important. And as Bowie showed us, with a 40-year career of amazing music, groundbreaking sort of social politics, he's done so much for the world in so many spheres. Trying new things is so important. Next, not being afraid of failure. I won't dive too deeply into this because it's quite a played-out notion. But Bowie said that in art you can crash your plane and walk away. And what he meant that creativity, it's okay to fail in creativity. Marketing, advertising, and communications are ultimately creative industries, fueled by creative problem solving through creative thinking. Unfortunately, creativity is all too often forgotten amongst business talk, deadlines, programs, numbers, all those kind of logistical things. So the idea I think he's trying to promote here, and what we can learn from him, is that it's okay to have out-of-the-box ideas, or if we're on a completely different train of thought, share what we're thinking. Because sometimes, even if an idea doesn't pan out, it may lead you to a better idea. So it's okay to fail on your journey to success and think out of the box. It's actually encouraged. Next, with all this talk of change, innovation, and trying new things, it can only really be done if you have a strong idea of who you are as an individual or who you are as a brand. For Bowie, he knew that what he wanted to do was something artistically important rather than striving for success. Success should never be the end goal. Instead, you should have a strong purpose and an understanding of who you are. So Bowie resonated with people because he wanted to contribute to the canon of music. And he understood that people valued music as entertainment, respite from difficulties, and there's so many benefits that he saw in music. Understanding who you are as a brand is what allows you to resonate with consumers on a human and emotional level. Rather than just buying your product, and I'll dive a little bit deeper into this later, but rather than just buying your product, consumers will understand who you are, find commonalities, and flock to your brand because they willingly want to, rather than you're trying to force them through your marketing. So know who you are and bank on that when talking to people. The next point is knowing and catering for your audience. I mean, this is kind of marketing 101, but the term serving content gets thrown around quite a lot. I don't like the word serving because it implies that the consumer is passive. they receive your marketing without really having to do anything. Whereas the term catering, I believe, implies that a brand knows exactly what the consumer wants. On this, Bowie said that I really wanted more than anything else to contribute in some way to the culture I was living in. His whole life, he was a bit of an outsider. It started at a young age when he was bullied for being left-handed at a time where most people were right-handed. And this carried on throughout his life, haunting him until one day he accepted his difference and his uniqueness, and he actually said that he wanted to cultivate that into a career and make people feel that it was okay not to be alone. So what Bowie banked on throughout his whole musical career was that people didn't want to feel alone. He realized that all around the world, people from different countries who spoke different languages, came from different backgrounds, had different demographic, psychographic, geographic characteristics, all suffered with feelings of difference and inadequacy because of it. So he found that that was a human truth behind his music. He could have said early on that people liked my first album or my second album, and so let me just keep doing that over and over again. But he needed to evolve. And essentially the reason I think he did that is because he experimented a lot with genre, and he tapped into different markets, rock music, pop music, electronic music, experimental music, and he found different niches of people with different musical tastes, and he bonded with them over the feeling that it's okay not to feel like you're the only person who is a little bit different or a little bit unique. So he found a human truth, and this is something our lecturers have pushed so much throughout the year, as most of the Mac class will know, the human insight behind things. You can't just market to someone because you think you know what they want. You need to understand the cognition and the emotion behind their actions rather than just looking at their actions and their behavior. The last point I'd like to make is on the importance of reputation over recognizability. It's my favorite Bowie quote. He says, "Fame itself doesn't really afford you anything more than a good seat in a restaurant." And it's true. Recognizability will get you there. It'll get you on the A-list. But firstly, you can be recognizable for all the wrong reasons, infamy, or you can be recognizable without bringing any value into the world. Kardashian. Yeah. So whilst Bowie was virtually recognizable throughout his whole career for his interesting fashion sense and different musical style and experimentation, he was known as a meticulous worker. He took time to throw himself into everything he did, have new experiences, experiment, expose himself to different things, and he was known as a bit of a perfectionist. And that's why his career, his library of music over the course of 40 years is, in my opinion, unparalleled. I encourage all of you to go and listen to his music. It's really, really good. So, for a brand as well, you can either push out blog after blog, tweet after tweet, and schedule a post at 2 o'clock every day for 2 months over the course of a campaign. But you'll only really be adding to the clutter. Recognizability is good for short-term awareness and action from consumers. You might find that a consumer can log onto Facebook and the first thing they see is your brand, but that's often lost amongst the myriad of other posts that come after that. The true value in creating content comes from taking time to craft well-researched, value-driven, and meticulous work, and it comes from a lot of research and a lot of hard work. But in my opinion, the value of crafting relevant content that consumers actually find value in rather than trying to push out to meet deadlines is always going to be better for ROI. I'll give you an example, and looking at two journalistic sort of institutions, if you look at a brand or a company like the Daily Maverick, which is a well-researched, value-driven, relevant, cutting-edge, up-to-date newspaper, and then you've got a thing like BuzzFeed that just pushes out literally quiz after quiz on which Disney princess you are or what breed of dog you are based on your star sign, which is kind of interesting for the first 2 quizzes, but not really, there's no value behind that. So taking the time to craft your work, spend hours and hours researching and being thorough, meticulous, is always going to pay off in the long run, and it's the right way to do things. So those are what we can learn from Bowie. I'd just like to leave you all with one lesson, and this comes more from me throughout the process of putting together this Mac Live speech. Everyone has access to things like Google, textbooks, and everyone knows someone who knows someone within an industry that can put you in touch with them. You can learn from all those things, and they're all very valuable. I'm not saying they're not. But there's a whole world of knowledge to be found in unexpected places. I could have gone straight to a textbook and looked for ways to learn about marketing and really exemplify the things we've learned throughout this whole year. But I found that I could learn more from looking at David Bowie, and he taught us more tangible lessons than any textbook ever could. So I encourage you to look for knowledge in unexpected places, and you'll definitely find something. Thank you.